This is our second class in the book of Obadiah. I'm Marion Fox, and we'll be having 3 lessons on the book of Obadiah. It's a short book, but we'll have 3 lessons on it. In Obadiah 1:7, we see the treachery of Edom's allies. Now, I got a question. Edom, who is the father of the nation called Edom? Who's the
Esau?
Esau. Esau is also called Edom. His name was called Edom. Jacob's name was also called Israel. Okay. So Edom means red. I'm convinced the Red Sea is the Gulf of Aqaba, and it's called Red Sea because not because the water is red, but because it was Edom Sea. And they will see some maps on this in a minute. We saw that last week. We'll see some more this week. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee on thy way. Now he's speaking to Edom, even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread lay a snare under thee. There is no understanding in him. So right here, they had a confederacy. They had other nations they had treaties with, but sometimes treaties are made just because they're going to be broken. And we see evil nations don't keep their word when they make treaties. And so sometimes nations don't intend to keep their word when they make a treaty. And the allies of Edom are not named confederacy, but they probably include Ammon, Moab, Gaza, and Tyre, and maybe some neighboring Arab tribes. Probably that's what they refer to. You see, this name is 1:6 and Amos 1:9. Thus saith Jehovah, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, yea, for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole people to deliver them up to Edom. See, they were in confederacy with Edom. That is Gaza. That would be the Philistines. So here, if you look at it, it's in red. The Philistine states are in red in this map. And we see Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. These are their states. Here are the Arab tribes down in here. Kingdom of Judah up here. Kingdom of Moab over here. And Ammon up here. Now Moab and Ammon were the sons of, whose sons were they? Help me out, somebody.
Lot's daughters.
There were Lot's sons by his 2 daughters, okay? And then, of course, Israel in the north, that's the kingdom split after the death of Solomon. Rehoboam was foolish. Kingdom of Edom down here is kind of a yellow or goldish color, gold color. And here's one of their chief cities, it would be Petra down here. All right. We have some of the tribes over here would be Arab type tribes over here. All right. So they were all in confederacy with them. Probably the Moabites and the Arabs and these other tribes, definitely they were bordered on them, okay? So these probably are the nations that he's talking about. Verse 7 of Amos 1, but I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza and set about the palaces thereof, and I will cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. That's where the king was. I will turn my hand against Ekron, that's another one of their cities, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord Jehovah. So the Philistines would finally perish as a nation. And of course, we see the war going on right now in Gaza, that area, right the same area, right now in Israel and the Arabs there, the people of that region. In Amos 1:9, he says, thus said Jehovah, for 3 transgressions of Tyre. Tyre was the trading city, and they controlled the trade in the ocean, in the Mediterranean Sea with their ships and their ships of war, their navy. So Tyre for 4, for 3, 8 for 4. This is a figure of speech, which we'll get into later. I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole people to Edom. So they're involved in it too, probably another one of the treacheries of their allies. Remember not the brotherly covenant, but I will send a fire on the wall of Tyre, and it shall devour the palaces thereof. Finally, Alexander the Great finally destroyed Tyre, but they had some other nations come up against them before. Edom had trusted in the word of men, not in a true and living God. Later, Edom joined itself with the Babylonians under Nabonidus, who was the father of Nebuchadnezzar. In their conquest of Judah, and the Babylonians turned on them later. And we see this in Lamentations 4:22. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwelleth in the land of Uz. So, land of Uz. And so this will help us to see where the land of Uz was. The cup shall pass through unto thee also. Thou shalt be drunken and shalt make thyself naked. Now, this probably, getting drunk and getting naked, probably indicates, and it's something that would be a shameful thing to do. And so it's probably a figure of speech for their depravity. They become so depraved, and they're not controlling themselves. The punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. So the Edomites won't carry you away into captivity, right? So it won't happen. He will visit thine iniquity, O daughter of Edom. He will uncover thy sins. So there'll come a reckoning for the sins of the nation. So the nation, there's a reckoning for their sins and their wickedness. It occurs. Failure of the wisdom and power of the Edomites in verses 9. Back to our book again, Obadiah 1:8-9. And their own wisdom wouldn't deliver them. Their own thinking and figuring and conniving and trying to figure out how to do things, how to keep their power. And if they had been the right kind of nation, they could have kept their power. Shall I not in that day, saith Jehovah, destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed, to the end that everyone shall be cut off from the mount of Esau by slaughter. So again, we have their mountain that represents them, as Zion represents Israel. Right? Teman is mentioned. Mount of Esau, of course, is Mount Seir, as we see here. And so it says here in Genesis 36:8, Teman is just a region, and I believe a city. And Esau dwelt in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. And these are the generation of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in Mount Seir. So the mountain here is a figure of speech is given. In this case, it's probably a metonymy. We just studied metonymies in the class, hermeneutics class, last hour. And I believe this is a metonymy, where the mountain is put for the people, for the nation. And Zion is put for Israel in some passages, and Mount Seir is put for the Edomites. And it's the same figure of speech, metonymy. Mount Seir is mentioned in 38 verses in the scriptures. It's used by way of synecdoche, and it could be a synecdoche or metonymy, either one, to refer to Edom, to the nation itself. God gave Mount Seir to Edom. He tells us this. In Deuteronomy 2:4, he says, and command thou the people, saying, ye are to pass through the border of your brethren, the children of Esau, that dwell in Seir. And they will be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. They're going to be afraid of you. They fear you. So here we see the children of Israel. I'm going to give you what I'm convinced the Red Sea is, and I gave it earlier. It's this what we call the Gulf of Aqaba. I believe that's the Red Sea. And Ezion Geber in the Bible, two passages, I believe there's two, maybe three, but I think there's just two, that tell us that Ezion Geber is on the Red Sea. And so this is the Red Sea right down here. And I put my mouse around, move around, and that's the Red Sea. I think when the children of Israel come out of Egypt, they come up through here and down along the coast and went across right here, across the Red Sea down here. I think that's where they crossed the Red Sea. I think that's the place. All right. Any question? All right. And so they come across, went through Mount Sinai is right over here. And the New Testament in Galatians tells us Mount Sinai is in Arabia. And Arabia was down in here, and this was never Arabia at that time. It was part of Egypt. Okay, so it's over here. They came up, and the Edomites would not let them go through, so they had to go around it, around Edom. They wouldn't let them go through. Right? They were cousins, but they wouldn't let them go through. Any questions? This is the caravan routes that the caravans would take in going up and bringing spices and other things from India, bring it up and bring it to the area up in this region. Tyre was a place where they would take them on, put them on the ships and take them and sell them. And so they got rich doing this. Egypt was part of this traffic too through here. It went up from Ezion Geber across. It was a highway across here. And so they travel on that road. But these are caravan routes, trade routes. Okay, so they'd come up from what is now in the south end of the Arabian Peninsula down there, where the Houthis are rebelling and causing trouble down there. It's in at the bottom down here. We don't have it down here. I'm not going to show it. Okay. Any questions about this? That's how they got rich. They made these caravans pay pretty good tribute to come through their land, and then if they didn't pay, they raided them, and so they get hit by their armies. So they learned to pay, and they got too greedy, and so they finally the people got tired of it, and they all ganged up and got against them. In Deuteronomy 2:5, he says, "Contend not with them, for I will not give you of their land." Let me go back now. I've spent too much time on the other. This Deuteronomy 2:4. When they come out of Egypt, they go through, and he says, they're going to be afraid of you. Skip this. Contend not with them. Don't you fight with them. I won't you go to war with them. For I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as for the sole of the foot to tread on, because I've given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. So Mount Seir was given to Esau, and Esau was given it by God, and God intended for him to serve God, and of course he didn't. His offspring became idolaters. The Edomites would not allow Israel to pass through their land. And God says, don't you try to go across. I won't help you. God is in effect saying, I will not aid you in this if you have a war with them. If you go to war with them to try to take their land, because I've given them the land. Violence and unbrotherly conduct toward Judah, of course, but sort of Obadiah, back to Obadiah 1:10. For the violence done to thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. So the nation of Edom doesn't exist today and never will exist again. You can't separate out genetically and figure out who are descendants of Esau. I'm sure there may be millions of people that have Esau's blood in them, but you can't separate them out and tell who they are. Okay? This can't be done. So violence done to thy brother Jacob. And of course, Edom was Esau. In the day But thou stoodest on the other side in the day the strangers carried away his substance, and foreigners entered into his gates and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast as one of them. You didn't help, and you helped the enemies, and you took their captives, made slaves out of them. Probably references the events of 2 Chronicles 21, verses 8 through 10. In his days, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. So Judah was ruling over them, but they hadn't taken their land away from them. They just made them pay tribute. Verse 9, and Jehoram passed over with his captains, all his chariots with him, and he rose up by night and smote the Edomites that compassed him about, and the captains of the chariots. So Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah unto this day. Then did Libnah revolt at the same time from under his hand, because he had forsaken Jehovah, the God of his fathers. They were given this land, this whole area promised to them to Abraham. They were given that land. If you go back and study it, and let me just give you a quick synopsis of it. They were given the land, and they were told to take it a little at a time. Take it, solidify it, take some more. But they decided they wanted to make slaves of these people rather than drive them out. And they have them to be workers for them. And what they did is they just didn't do what God said. And then these people that they made slaves out of wound up corrupting them. You have to do it God's way. God knows best. Always go by God's way. You can't compromise God's way. Right? And they were supposed to be given all this land, and they were at one time in the days of Solomon. They had all the land, but they should have driven those people out according to God's will. When they finally compromised and made treaties with them, God said, I'm not going to drive them out anymore. You're going to have to live with them. They're going to be a snare to you. So this is, if you study into the taking of the land and all this, it's a shame what happened. Compromise is what they went into. It's not clear whether or not Edom participated in the siege of Jerusalem, but Edom was as one of them, it says. Afraid to help a brother in need was the same as being against him. Jesus said, he that is not with me is against me. Now, what Jesus is saying here in this context, the Pharisees and these scribes had falsely accused him of casting out demons by Beelzebub. So Jesus shows an argument, he makes an argument. And then he's in the prior verse, in verse 29, he's talking to the scribes and Pharisees. Then he turns and talks to the audience. He that is not with me is against me, he that is not with me scattereth. Then he comes back and starts talking to that's talking to the audience, the crowd. And he's saying, you got to fish or cut bait, is the way we say it. You're not with me, you're against me. He that is not with me scattereth. So you're scattering. And then he turns back and talks back again, I think in verse 31, to the Pharisees and scribes again. So you can see the change of pronouns there, and it's very vivid. Very vivid is what's happening there. When I preach on the sins against the Holy Spirit, blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, this is one of the points I make. Now, he gives them a warning against this kind of conduct. But look not thou on the day of thy brother in the day of his disaster, and rejoice not over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither speak proud in the day of distress. The Bible warns against rejoicing when your enemy falls, when he has troubles. So you study the book of Proverbs, you can see that. What we ought to say is when our enemies have troubles, we ought to say, I'm sorry they have troubles. If God has brought this trouble on, if the trouble has been brought on by their wickedness, then God is just. But I don't like for people to have to be punished. I don't like for them to have to be punished by God. I don't like for a criminal to have to go to prison, but they do. And I'm sorry they have to go to prison. I wish they had not done that. I wish they had not been what they were. That ought to be our attitude. Enter not into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity, my people being Israel or Judah, in this case, probably Judah. Yea, look not thou on their affliction in the day of their calamity. Either lay your hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. So you're going to gain things from their being carried away captive. And stand thou not in the crossway, to cut off those of his that escape. So they block the roads, deliver not up those to him that remain in the day of distress. So they would capture them and sell them back as slaves. So we're trying to flee. The first warning was not to look with coveting upon the disaster and rejoice in the calamity of their brethren. We've had big tornadoes in Oklahoma City area, and you'll be surprised, probably maybe not, at the vultures that try to come in and try to claim they're going to help you, and they'll help you clean up, and they charge you exorbitant rates to clean up the disaster, the debris that's around. And the state has laws against that kind of thing. Yeah. The second warning was not to take the spoil of the war, take the things from Judah and perhaps even Israel, but I think it's Judah he's talking about here. Third one was not to stand in the crossway to rob, plunder, and or to sell as slaves the Jews, the children of Israel, who were fleeing the warfare to other nations. They were trying to get away from it to get safety in other nations, but they were stood in the way and wouldn't let them go, and they plundered them. Any questions so far? So the animosity between Jacob and Esau continued in their offspring until it finally caused destruction of Edom. The unfaithfulness of Judah caused God not to protect Judah, and her enemies overran her. But even her enemies had no right to do some of the things they did. Edom saw that this is an opportunity to even the score between Esau and Jacob, between the Edomites and Judah. And lo and behold, they saw it as an opportunity to do that when they're weak. Any questions? Comments?